Well, friends, welcome back to the stage. We've been talking this weekend about some of your individual stuff, so what I would love to share with this audience is I'd love to hear some of your recollections directly of being under the Disney projects. And I think the big one that everybody always wants to know, so let's go ahead and ask this. Who among you actually met Walt Disney himself, and what was that experience like? Go ahead, Margaret. Start us off. Ladies first.
Me? Yes. Oh, yes. Well, we had, when I started to work, the whole idea was Mark Davis, who designed Tinkerbell, who did all the ladies for Disney. He was one of the 9 old men, said, we're going to be on stage, sound stage 1, and we will be working there in the center of the stage. And so I went over just as happy as a clam and started to work. And we looked over, and there were a group of people that were coming in. And remember, I didn't talk, so we didn't have to match dialogue with the action that I was doing. So the door opened up, and here comes this group of people, and Buddy Ebsen is in front, and you couldn't miss him. And then there was this familiar figure. So he came over, and they went against the wall, and they were working on animatronics. They were figuring it out. That's how long ago it was. And then the other men left, and this figure comes towards us. He's sort of in the dark, and I thought, that's the head of the studio. And I was paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed. So I put my cover up, and they invited me into the conversation. The next time he came, I went, that's Walt Disney. And I was even more paralyzed. And I must tell you, he was charming. He would come over and chit-chat. And I went to school with both of his daughters, Sharon and Diane. And I didn't think anything about it to say so. And he stepped up. He says, I understand you went to school with my daughters. I was even more paralyzed. But he was just so kind and so thoughtful. I'm sure that he had his moments otherwise, but at least with me, he couldn't have been nicer. And, well, everybody at Disney was just wonderful.
Very nice, very nice. Donnie, what you got?
Think about how the image of corporations are today. I promise you, Walt Disney, who built Bambi from scratch, in a little small building to what it is now, a massive enterprise at Burbank, California, was an example of leadership by example, leadership by doing it himself, a gracious man, straight, honest, and look at the number of people that he had that retired with him during his time as a creator leader of Bambi. I mean, lots of them retired, as opposed to many other corporations. And he was extremely, let me use a word that we don't use much anymore. He was a real example gentleman. And on top of everything else, he put up with me. And that was no small trick in those days, okay? Really a neat guy. Many examples that I don't want to take all the time. We've got these wonderful guys here. I just give you a couple of quick cameos. I've been in 8 movies before with real parts. Da, 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 da. And then the first animated was Bambi. Okay? He found out that I had fired at age 5. I fired my manager, smart mouth guy from New York, because he told my mother, you can't do Walt Disney, he's a cartoonist. Okay? A little rude to my mom, so I fired him. Literally. And made the magazine. 5-year-old Dunagan fires his manager. Huh? Boom. I didn't box shit in those days, but I could have right there. Anyway, as soon as Mr. Disney, who greeted us in the parking lot, when my mom and I first got there, as soon as he found out that I had fired that manager, he patted me on the back. He must have known that jerk, you know. He was a great guy. Yes. If we need examples of leadership by example today, let's resurrect Walt Disney.
My father was a screenwriter in Hollywood back in those days, starting with silent movies, believe it or not. And his final movie was with Howard Hughes, a movie called Hell's Angels, which was an aerial combat movie with the First World War. And he knew Walt and heard about the fact that he was going to make this major new animated movie. And so my father took me over. They were doing auditions for Bambi's part, and so there were about 30 kids, and I was one of them. And when it was all said and done, my voice was definitely not appropriate for Bambi. So there it was. And a couple of weeks later, the animators decided to listen to all the voices, see if there was anything they could use. And when they came to my voice, one of the animators said, hey, that kid be great for the rabbit. And that was it. There were never auditions for Thumper. During all of that and following as we went into recording sessions, Walt stopped in a couple of times, and I did have an opportunity to meet him, and as Donnie says, and Margaret, he was a terribly gracious man. He never raised his voice, and so forth. There was one other issue where, or time when we went down to look at the animals. They had a little paddock with some deer and rabbits, and I think they had a de-skunked skunk. And so we got to see the animals that were going to inspire the animators and let them know the proper configuration of the animals. And Walt was down there with us, and he was just a great guy. So I didn't have as much interaction with him as Donnie did, but what I did was wonderful.
My closest relationship with Hollywood was the fact that I lived there, had no other connections, and people have asked me, well, how did you get into this particular movie? I was at Sunday school one day, obviously Sunday, and my Sunday school teacher asked me if I wanted to be in a movie, and as a shy boy who had just turned 6, I said no, I wasn't interested. I probably didn't use that many words. And my uncle, who was there, came over to my folks' house and told them that what was transpiring. So it wasn't long after that that we went over to the Disney studios, where they had no idea who I was, who my folks were, or who my Sunday school teacher was. So the conversation went on that, in fact, they were still auditioning for one more part. And I got the part of the cutest one, fortunately, the skunk. And that's how that transpired. I did not know any of the major players in the movie or right at the time, or these guys, or even Walt Disney. But I met him later. He lived across the street in the Los Feliz Hills, across the street from one of my best friends. So I would periodically meet him, and then I met his 2 daughters. One Diana Disney actually married the gentleman from USC who became the head of the studios for a period of time. So some of this was just kind of a accident, and I haven't really. I've had a couple of movies where I played in the background, but no speaking parts. But I guess you're used to that with no speaking parts. So, at any rate, it's been a very enjoyable situation. If you're ever in Southern California, you may want to go to the Disney Studios in Burbank, and there you will find Walt Disney's old studio, preserved just exactly as it was, and a lot of history that's there. They'll guide you through it. You'll find how this man thinks and how he acted. I would say probably more out of the right side of his brain. He was very artistic. he had a brother who was really perhaps more involved in the financial area, but he made a great leap at that time to start Disneyland in Southern California. Everybody wondered whether that was actually going to be a success, and obviously it was.
Walt was the heart. His brother Roy was the brain. That's what I've always heard it as.
Quick add-on. Nobody could do Thumper today or yesterday better than Peter Behn. In Panama Canal, Asia, several of our states, without boring you with a whole bunch of detail, this old jerk has had a chance to use Thumper, Peter Behn, with children and get feedback from parents, counselors, all kinds of folks, particularly in Panama, wonderfully, okay, with children that maybe see some aggressions on television and get all wound up, okay? Peter Behn, and I look at the children, they don't even know Peter, okay, but I do. Remember this? If you can't say something nice, say it. Don't say anything at all. But use that and use that and use that and owe it to him.
I would
Don't say nothing at all.
I know.
Yeah,
I
definitely.
knew they were going to do that. I knew he was going to do that.
You all went on and had some great personal careers and personal achievements. Over the years, of course, you kind of put the Disney stuff behind you, but once in a while, I know you would sort of surprise somebody, be like, "Oh, hey, I was that." What was the most memorable reaction to when you surprised somebody by saying, "Oh, I was Flower," and they were like, "What? No!" What was that most memorable moment for each of you?
You know, I was at a meeting of a group at the Methodist Hospital in Southern California, now the USC Arcadia Hospital, and the lady who was the head of the ethics committee asked me what I was doing lately, and I told her about the fact that I had been located along with the other two cast members who played the young people in Bambi. And she said, "Oh my God, I'm getting goose pimples all over me." Very excited. And of course, that did the same kind of a reaction back to us. But it's so much fun. And there's one other one that I could mention. My wife's niece met us for a luncheon, and when she came in, she was kind of just saying, "Burr, burr, burr, duh." And Gail said to her, what are you talking about? She said, "Well, that's part of the Bambi movie." And my roommate and I always do that just for fun, burr, burr, duh. And Gail said, "Well, do you realize that you're sitting next to the character who played the skunk and Flower in the movie Bambi?" She said, "Oh my, I can't complete the rest of that sentence," but she was most excited.
There you go. Who's got another one? Whenever somebody discovered where either they found out, now I know, Donnie, in the core, you didn't want them to know, and they held that against you.
A little short to put you in the context of this thing, because a lot of people 90 years old and 65 discovering this have a ball with this. Think back to World War II for us, Pearl Harbor. I mean, 7 or 8 films before Bambi, real parts. First animated was Bambi. Pearl Harbor, bang, boom. Lots of our lives changed. Mine did radically. Okay? Age 14, I'm in a boarding house supporting myself. From then to now. You know, a lot of educators use that as an example with some of our modern lives, okay? From age 13 forward until 21.5 years ago, precisely, I'm 90, 18 forward to 21.5 years ago, never said anything publicly about any of the movies. Son of Frankenstein, Tower of London, none of great movies, and not Bambi. Okay, wonderful Bambi. Didn't say a word. Was I proud of that memory? Yes. But was I in an environment where I would see men that bragged and bragged about things all the time? I've developed a real intense, not dislike or meanness, but discomfort with men who bragged about things. Some of them who did one little thing in their life and they bragged forever. Yeah. I decided I could do my life and do some good stuff, not based on the past. What really did it for me was my entry in the Marine Corps and during the Korean War. And the first two major commanders I had, battalion commanders, I became a battalion commander leader years later. My first two in a row had incredible World War II jungle fighting valor medals. They never wore them. Never wore them. One had the Medal of Honor, Navy Cross, 2 Silver Stars. Look those up, okay? Yeah. I never saw, he never wore them until a parade one day. Some things get into our hearts and our minds that influence us forever, don't they? This is mine. Finally at a parade, and I've been in this man's command for 9 or 10 months, and I'm a brand new corporal, little torque guy, you know. Now we're at a parade, and because the commandant of the Marine Corps is going to be there from Washington, this lieutenant colonel wore all his decorations. He walked by and almost fell down. You know? Wow. I asked an old World War II first sergeant standing there, wonderful man named Sigurs, why doesn't the colonel wear with all those wonderful medals all the time? Listen, quote, bang. He's not a show-off. He doesn't need to have his big medals in order to lead. He can lead without a shirt on. Boy, that made an impression on me forever. So I never talked about it. 25 years in the Marine Corps, I never said a word about any of the movies, nothing. Until the very end month, wonderful general that I worked for several times, named Houghton. I'm a battalion commander in his boot camp in San Diego. He's the command general. It's 5:30 in the morning. We're in dress uniform already, as we should be. Busy, busy, busy. I get a call on remember the old-fashioned intercoms on your desk, you know? When he wanted me to do something, Marine Corps boom boom, right? It was, Dunagan, come and see me. When he wanted to give me something additional duty, oh boy, I need one, right? It was, Major Dunagan, would you visit with me? So I went to see him. And about 6 o'clock in the morning, big, nice, big office. He looks at me and says, I want you to audit the auditors auditing the PX. We had some hanky-panky in the big PX. The Department of Defense ordered, paid for a business CPA firm to come in, civilians, audit, right? Now the general thinks there's some hanky-panky going on in that. I didn't know all this yet. And I said, General, I never was smart with him. Came close. General, that's fine, sir. I have him assemble at 4:30 in the morning. Ah! They're civilians, you can't do that. How about 6:30, sir? He looked at me. Dunagan, don't get smart. And he reached over and patted the side of his desk. And I looked over there, and it was a dossier, kind of a Washington-level dossier I'd never seen before. White House clearance, ultra. They go back to birth on those, okay? He patted the desk, so he knew. He said, you will audit the auditors, won't you, Major Bambi? Guess who audited the auditors?
Give it up for that. Come on now. Yeah.
May I?
Margaret.
I'm a little different than these gentlemen. In the situation, as I said, I started when I was 4 years old, and it was the time I was born in 1929, and I caused the Depression. Well, and 2 months later, it came in October. That's close. And anyway, my adopted parents, who were old enough to be my grandparents, and my mother, who was the most adorable, annoying little mother that you could ever want. She wanted me to be somebody, but she also wanted me to make some money because people were not making money. Well, she learned that you could make $6.50 a day if you were an extra or one of the little kids that were in the different movies. So she made up her mind that that's what I was going to do. And I did. I started in our gang comedies. Well, the first one I did was the Shakespeare one.
Yeah, Midsummer Night's Dream.
Thank you. With Mickey Rooney, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I started in tap dancing. I'm a dancer doing tap dancing, and nobody does tap dancing anymore. But I do it when I go up to the Andy Griffith show, and I up in Mount Airy every year, and I still entertain tap dancing. But what I'm getting to is, so my world was always show business. Everything was show business, etc. And I'm thinking about one of the times that I got a call. I was a dance director, assistant dance director at Fox on a big movie called I'll Get By. And I get a call from my agent. I had an agent by that time. I'm about 18. And they said, there is an interview going on over at a studio, and they're looking for a dancer who could play a 3.5-inch sprite who doesn't talk. And they said, could you get over there, and could you get a day off and go over there? And I said, well, you know, we're right in the middle of doing the big dance numbers, and so, well, she said, it's at Disney. And I said, I'll be there at 6 a.m. And the most exciting thing that happened to me at Disney, I'm not joking, I'm really not joking, because I've been going up to all these studios, you know, walking up to the gate and showing my number, and you didn't drive onto the lots when you were what I did. You parked outside and got a tram that they took you. So anyway, I drive up to the gates, and I look at the man, and I gave him my name, and he said, wait a minute. And I'm going, he doesn't have my name. And he says, oh, yes, won't you come in, Margaret? That was the most exciting thing that ever happened to me with Disney. And then, to top it all, he showed me where my parking place was. You don't know what that means. Disney Studios is the smallest studio of any of the big studios.
Yes.
And when I got out, I was lost. I was looking for a rehearsal spot, and this man walked up to me, a tall, lanky man who turned out to be one of the top artists, and I didn't know who he was, but anyway, he came up and he says, you look lost. And I said, well, I'm supposed to find the office of Mark Davis. And I said, I don't. He said, oh, he's up on the 3rd floor, and here's a building that looks like a hospital. It doesn't look like show business at all. And he said, I said, that one? And he said, I'll take you. And he stopped with what he was doing, and he took me up and down the hallway on the 3rd floor, and he said, that door that's open, that's Mark Davis's door. You go ahead there. And I thanked him. I was stunned. I had worked on every studio lot for many, many times, MGM, et cetera. No one would have ever stopped and helped me. You just didn't do that. At Disney, they stop and help you. You can talk to them. If Walt Disney was walking down the street, walk up to him and say hi. It was just the most amazing place to work as far as I was concerned, and that was all because of Walt Disney. That came down from him. Now, I understand on the project of Bambi, he has 2 offices, one where he met people and one where he actually worked. And I was told by several of the artists that worked on Bambi, the top people, they said, you wouldn't have wanted to be in the meetings in the 2nd office when Walt Disney got really excited and couldn't get his ideas over to somebody. He could get very hot. Very hot. But otherwise, you walked up to people, you talked to them. And when I married my husband 4 years ago, we were over at the barn in Griffith Park, the Walt Disney barn. 400 people came, and out of there were five top producers that I had worked with Disney. Came over just like everybody else. It was so different, And I just want to let you know, it was great.
Wonderful. Oh, yeah, please. Peter, what was a moment you can recall when you were like, oh, by the way, I was Thumper? It's like, no, what?
Well, I was hoping you'd repeat the question so we could all remember. I wish I had the stories that these folks all have. A lot more experience with studio and Disney than I. But once the movie was done, we had already moved to Tucson, Arizona from LA, and the recordings were done in sections because they got the voices and then they did a section of the artwork, the automation for the movie, and then they have another recording session. So there, as I recall, for me, there were like eight sessions, and so we had moved to Tucson, came back with my mother on the train, which is kind of cool because they had the pull-down cots and stuff on the train from Tucson, and so that was 2 times, and then went back to Tucson, became a normal kid, went to school. In fact, I was in a 2-room schoolhouse, and my sister had a boyfriend who had a horse, and he went off to the Second World War and gave my sister his horse, and for some reason my sister didn't want to ride a horse, so she let me use this horse all the time, and I ended up riding a horse on 3 miles of gravel road to the 2-room schoolhouse for a while. That was one of my interesting childhood memories. So this is still without any, certainly remembrance, but without any consciousness about my having been in this movie. And that continued really through my life till I was in my 40s. And we were living in Vermont at that time. I was married. And just through happenstance, happened to mention to a couple of my friends, but not the general world, that I had the part of Thumper. And that was sort of it, didn't make a big deal of it. And then a few months later, I got a phone call from this friend saying that he had been in Florida and there was a small advertisement in the newspaper that he had seen that Disney was looking for Thumper. He brought it back to me, and that was a real shock, and the reason that they were looking for me was they were having one of their anniversaries and they wanted to get some of the voices back. And so that was a real shock to me that this movie that I had been involved in so many years prior that I hadn't spent a lot of time focusing on was still an issue or an entity that people loved. So at that point, I became a little more conscious of it and wasn't quite as shy about mentioning from time to time that I had been that. One time, I was in a grocery store and I just turned to somebody I didn't know and asked them if they had ever seen the movie Bambi. And they said, oh, of course, when I was a kid. And I loved it and so forth. And I said, well, do you remember Thumper? And they said, oh, yes. And I'm sorry, they said, that was my favorite character. Except for Flower. Flower was the cutest. Anyway, so I don't go around in grocery stores and ask dozens of people, but I haven't been shy about it if the circumstances were appropriate, because I realized that for somebody to meet the voice from this movie, the voice of Thumper, the voice of Bambi, Flower, really has an impact. These people are, as I think you must be, or you wouldn't be here, you kind of think it's cool and that you've been managed to meet one of these people. And now you should really be pleased because we're 90 years old and still alive, and that's beyond the averages. So anyway, now I've lost my thread. I'm not sure I answered your question.
You
but
did.
That's,
You absolutely
that's what
absolutely
you
did.
got.
Absolutely did. And we're just about out of time. And our apologies to the
Sorry.
audience. We didn't get your questions, but they'll be at their tables. So if you had something you want to ask them, you could more than welcome to do it down there. What I would like to end off with, and don't worry, Major, I'll give you a chance to talk about the book. What's the best advice that you could give to us? Because all of you have been there and back again. What's the best advice that you could give to us?
Towards what?
Any life.
A life. Whoa, now you got about 60 hours?
The best succinct advice you could give.
I've never been asked that question before. That's deep. Deep. Tinkerbell has never been deep. Ever. As a matter of fact, Tinkerbell goes and says, it's adventure ho. What happens next? Have fun. Take a look at everything. And I guess maybe I'm going to say that's what you do, because you can look at things from the negative. I had a young man call me up who was visiting at a show one time, and he made a mistake of offering gifts to the people that he wanted to meet. And they sort of turned him aside, and he was devastated. And he called me up and he said, what did I do? What did I do? And I mean, he felt just terrible. And I said, did you ever get to meet the ones that you wanted to? He said, oh yes, the next day I met all 4 of them. I said, so what are you bothering about what didn't happen? What did happen was you got to meet them, and you learned along the way what not to do again in another situation. That's what life is you take the positive. As one man said, a golfer said, complaining about the grass, the green, it wasn't cut properly, and he kept complaining. And then finally the player that he was playing with says, I don't know what you're complaining about. You're standing on the right side of the grass. It's turn it around, think happy thoughts, and think what came out of that was good, and what did I learn?
And by the way, you've also got some more fantastic thoughts in this lovely book that you have available downstairs, Tinkerbell Talks. She's got lots of copies and great stories about her career, her life. This is available downstairs, and with a purchase it, and of course, while you're there, get it autographed.
And you can also, if I may,
Yes.
get it on my website, which is tinkerbelltalks.com. Really easy.
There you go. What's the best advice, Major?
Let me share this with you in the context of a man who's had the last rites said of him twice. Unnecessary. We're still here, right? Seeing a lot of life, different countries, a lot of people, tons of different life circumstances. There is many chapters of things I have to share with you, to take with you. But just let me give you a couple that have had impact with people the most. Enjoy being a whole person. Enjoy being yourself, not a role player. Not a person at work or somewhere where people will say, I wonder how he's going to be today. I wonder how she is today. Huh? Be the same person. If other people can handle that, let them adjust. Know who you are, be proud of it, and be a whole person, not a role player. Big difference. It really works. And 2, and this is corny, but it is clinically sound. Even when things are tough, somewhere in our lives, right this moment or tomorrow, the glass is half full. It's not half empty. Love that. Look forward to tomorrow's And once in a while, honestly say to yourself, what can I do today or tomorrow to help somebody else that doesn't expect it, even if it's a little bit? Huh? Even if it's a little bit. So you can extend your life past yourself and be a whole person, not a role player. Woo.
Well, I think if you look at the context of the movie Bambi and the way the animals treat one another, the happiness, the joy, the courtesy that the animals display to one another, in contrast with so many of today's movies that have the violence and guns and shooting that I personally find disturbing. And I think that with kindness and you can get a lot further in this world than beating up on people. And I recommend we all be nicer to one another.
Doctor?
Yeah, somebody asked me if I had much personal stress during the time that I was making the movie. And the answer is at that tender young age, not really. I had a lot of enjoyment when my grandfather came to take me out of class, and the other kids were kind of jealous of that. But the only time that there was maybe some stress, the movie was made in 1939. It came out in 1942. It was supposed to come out in 1940, but Walt Disney also had a blockbuster at that time, Dumbo, so they postponed it. Then the following year, when we had, in the wintertime, we had Pearl Harbor, so it had to be postponed. So I finally got to see the movie, and my first impression was that, oh my gosh, there's some very scary stuff in this movie. So the only thing in the early part that I remember is all of the animals working with each other, and then later all meeting their mates. There was a word that they used during the movie at one time, if those of you who've looked at it, called Twitter-pated. So all of the young kids got Twitter-pated. And but then you had fires, then you had hunters and shooting and deaths and things like that. And that led kind of a chill. But when you look at the end of the movie, the prince of the forest ends up on the precipice on the hill, guided by his father. And fathers are so important, I'll tell you that. Then he ended up becoming the king of the forest. And I mentioned in another talk that our gentleman here, Bambi, had started off as a private and went into the military and ended up as a major. So that's a pretty darn good achievement. But there are moral stories that you can get from looking at Bambi. And of course, in life, there was a black gentleman who ran for president a few years ago, and people asked him how he had done so well. He'd become a billionaire. And he said, well, if anything goes wrong, I don't blame anybody else. I take care of the problem. That's still, I think, a good lesson to have.
And not to sell you short, sir, you are a doctor. You've dedicated your life to the healing of others, and thank you for that. And you're still active, still doing research, aren't you? Aren't you on the rheumatoid committee, still on the committee?
Yeah, I got my medical license in 1960, so that's what 62 years ago. And I'm still practicing. But I've opened up a new window with this, and then, as you're aware, I've also written a murder mystery. So you can look for my name coming out maybe sometime during the next year. I was going to call it Murder on the Third because it had to do with 4 physicians who found a body on a golf course. But a friend of mine, a neurosurgeon, suggested, well, a better name for that would be the Crime Doctors. And so I've already started the 2nd episode of that genre.
We absolutely look forward to that. I'm getting the lights on, so unfortunately we do have to wrap this up. Animate, this has been the Legends of Disney. That was our time. But before we go, though, we are going to take a photo with all of you and this amazing audience.
I would just like to make, this is the last show that I will do like this. I will be 95 in May. I think I have entertained people enough or bored them. I don't know which. So
You've entertained us.
I'm thrilled to be with these gentlemen. I'm thrilled with anything Disney, and I meet you all, and I want to cry. Anyway. So I will not be around much longer in these kind of shows, but you will see me on videos all over TV. You can't get rid of me that easily. And I really, really appreciate you. You are superb. Isn't he great? He really, you just are. And
I just work with good people.
and it's wonderful that I'm setting other goals farther on, and this would be the last one that I'll do like this, and that's heaven, and I wanted to tell you I love you all.
Friends, thank you for your talents, thank you for professionalism, thank you for the performances you brought to all your roles, and thank you for the insight and service. Thank you all. Round of applause for them. Thank you.